Jerusha and John, thank you so much for joining me here on the Social Entrepreneurship and Innovation Podcast. And just so listeners know, just to let them in on a little inside information, this isn't our first attempt at this. We were previously beguiled by some technical snafus. So again, to each of you, thank you for re-coordinating here to make sure that we got this conversation not only started, but finished and published to share with everyone. So thanks y'all so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Great to be with you, Cory.
And to get us started, John, you are a returning guest here at the podcast. So Jerusha, if you wouldn't mind opening up for us to briefly introduce yourself and the work that you do. And then John will kind of reintroduce you shortly thereafter.
So I'm Jerusha Stewart, CEO and co-founder of Take Your Seat. We are a community of like-minded individuals committed to achieving boardroom diversity. So we have an online digital platform, the first of its kind, that connects candidates, board leaders, executive search professionals, diversity professionals, and allies to achieve board diversity success, specifically to put more Black professionals into America's boardrooms. So that's my passion. That's why I'm here with you today. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to share Take Your Seat.
And thank you. And to you, John.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on. And as you'll hear loud and clear, Jerusha has incredible passion and energy for what we're working on. I'm pleased to be one of her co-founders. And outside of that, I've had the good fortune to lead a number of purpose-driven companies over the course of my career, companies like Burt's Bees and Seventh Generation. And I'm currently a partner with One Better Ventures, a company that advises and invests in mission-driven consumer goods companies. So it's good to be here and being joined by your listeners.
Lovely. And thanks, y'all, for the quick intros. Jerusha, I'd love if we could start the conversation by kind of setting the stage as to what extent is this an issue? Like, how lacking in diversity are our boardrooms, and really why did Take Your Seat get started? What is a bit of the origin story?
I think lack isn't even a word. It's more invisible, like dismal when you look at the numbers. And I think this issue goes even beyond the numbers in terms of inclusiveness and acceptance of diverse experiences and backgrounds in the boardroom. So when you look at the number, right, 4.1% of directors in America's boardrooms are Black. And as a Black woman, that number really does approach invisibility at 1%. So I am at the intersectionality of what is driving my passion for creating systemic change in the boardroom. And I think that, it's interesting. This idea of diversity is not new. It's come up before, right? This is not our first rodeo on the diversity picnic here. It's just that in the past, when people and organizations and companies have gone to bat for diversity, it's meant gender diversity. And then that gender diversity has turned into placement of white women on boards. And I think at this point, everybody is very much aware of where, what's happened and where the need is and where we need to, change the players in the room.
So really, Cory, the boards do not reflect America today, right? And so how can you represent America if you don't reflect America? And it is irrefutable. The data shows that more diverse boards perform better. And so a lot of companies are just simply doing themselves a disservice because they're underperforming because they lack diversity at the board level, and then their boards don't reflect their employee base, and the boards don't reflect the community that they serve. So there's a fundamental issue, a systemic issue that needs to be overcome. And, you know, the idea of Take Your Seat came about over the course of the last year because we've all been outraged by, you know, the clarity of the systemic injustice, particularly against the Black community in America. And my partners and I, you know, who happen to be white men, felt the deep need to do something. And what we know how to do is we know how to shape businesses, and we know that the levers for changing business, which I believe is the most powerful force on earth, the lever there is through the boardroom, is to shape governance. And if we can change governance of America's boards, we can change America. And that's what really led to the creation of Take Your Seat, and how we got to know Jerusha and partner with her to really create this vibrant platform, and which is now a really exciting and robust and growing community of Black executives.
And I just want to add, Cory, that it was their insightfulness that there was a way to simply and easily and directly to make a change, to give a seat, add a seat, make more room, to focus on the seat. That's what's really at stake here in America's boardrooms. And the idea that it was a network gap, that by creating a community, we could bridge the networking gap between the different players who make up a boardroom. And I really commend John and my partner, David, for having the courage to take those first steps to Take Your Seat a reality.
Well, and I'd be interested to know if y'all could draw this out a little bit further for me. Why is the boardroom, John, you mentioned the word governance, but why is the boardroom such an important leverage point and tipping point, you know, be it for-profit, nonprofit, what have you, just so we're all on the same page here?
Well, American corporations represent about 20 trillion of the $27 trillion GDP in the U.S. So, you know, the other factors are nonprofits and government. And so when you really think about it, our entire economy is driven by businesses. And the top 200 corporations in America muster the same economic clout as the poorest 4/5 of all of humanity on earth. So when you think about power, power is incredibly concentrated in America, and it's concentrated in, 200, 500, 1,000 corporations that really shape our community and our financial and economic agenda. So if we're ever going to create equality and a sense of equity and a sense of access for, Black and other underrepresented groups, we've got to start by doing that in the boardrooms of America. Board decision making, all of the big decisions with that 20 trillion really occur in the boardroom. Decisions float up, the major decisions float up. And so if we're going to think about what are the levers for dynamic change in a reasonable timeline, so pace and scale, you have to change the boardrooms of America to make that change occur.
And Jerusha, I'm wondering as well, with the background that you have, I know you have a background in law with your JD from Stanford Law. Why does running this organization, Take Your Seat, why does that make sense for you right now with what you've done in the past?
It's an interesting question, Cory. It's really like the culmination of a lot of different things that I've done in the past. It's almost like what Steve Jobs used to say, you can't really see where you're going looking forward. It's only looking back that you kind of connect the dots. And I've always been a fan of democratizing landscapes, providing access, education, and opportunity, being involved with causes that start as movements movements, more grassroots movements, and involve individuals. And then, as John says, using the lever of business to affect that change, realizing that it's when you put your money down, you're voting with your pocketbooks, that's when change happens. And what really drew me to take your seat is the scale of the money that's involved. The fact that in the boardroom, that these are the individuals who are deciding where, strategic decisions are being made in terms of capital investments, employees. Like, this is really where that rubber meets the road. That could change the lives of millions of people who look like me.
And so if y'all could paint a bit of a picture for us, I mean, one, there's the action item to make the boardrooms of America more accurately reflect America. If that's achieved, I'm curious, like what sort of things are we missing out on here, so we can kind of imagine, not just in the business community, but all stakeholders involved. Like, what are the things that really then starts to affect and manifest elsewhere, just outside of maybe the business community itself?
Well, I think very simply, just think about in your local community where money is invested, where banks are put. If there is someone of color sitting in that boardroom, the decisions in terms of where these companies expand. Your neighborhood, my neighborhood gets a grocery store, another neighborhood doesn't, because of what happened and who spoke in that boardroom. So I think that is why it's so critical. And the idea that this isn't just a top-down movement right now, it's a bottom-up as well, with shareholders exercising their voice. And this is one of the first times, I think, in history where that's happened, where shareholder voice has become so important, and they've weighed in and said that we don't want to do business as usual. So I think that's another important thing that's going on, where you get to see that you matter. Everybody.
Yeah, I think Jerusha raises really important points there. And Cory, if you think back to the history of, treatment of Blacks in America, it's been 400 years of systemic injustice. And while government has pulled down a number of those fundamental, underpinnings, business has been a party to the injustice. You think about banking and redlining, and for example, I mean, there are so many illustrations of where business has actually reinforced the injustice. And business has to go from being part of the problem to being part of the solution. And so, you look at the average Black family in America today, their net worth is about zero. I mean, it is, what we've done is we've bankrupted families for generations because of the economic injustice, the way the system is built. And if we're going to create real access and opportunity and wealth creation for Black families over time, business needs to lead the way. And we need Black executives in the boardroom being advocates, explaining and sharing the need for change. And we need white advocates and other representation to become, to remove the lens and to become much more thoughtful in the approach. And if we do that, we'll create a better and richer and stronger society, but we'll also accelerate business performance. So there's a good on both fronts. There's the enhanced performance of our economy and business performance, and frankly, then, what we'll do on societal justice and balance. And so I think the big picture is really inspiring, and it's not that hard. You think about it. If we can really create diversity in the top 500 companies in the United States, and that's not that many seats. If we can take 1,000, 1,500 seats and really flip them, will go a long way to creating that brighter future that we all aspire for.
And I just want to amplify, Cory, what John is saying about wealth, the creation of wealth, right? Because for hundreds of years, Black families have lost out on that lottery. You know, we went to law school and business school just like everyone else, and we weren't told that there was this opportunity to sit in a boardroom and not only make these decisions, but also to earn these dollars, to be in on these equity deals and these IPOs at a level that would increase the wealth of Black folks across the whole, right? So in a way, we are a lost generation. We may have been the first generations who've gone to the fancy law schools and medical schools and business schools, and yet there was still a door that we didn't know about. We couldn't even open that door because we didn't even know it was there. So now one of the things that's a huge mission of Take Your Seat is creating that flywheel, those people who are coming up in the next generation, the next 5 to 10 years of excellence and talent and experience, who can now not only go into the boardrooms to make decisions, but go into the boardrooms to create a new level of generational wealth for Black people across the entire country. And in some way, that might possibly represent a new form of reparations. And that's why this is so important.
I mean, you're getting me excited about the vision of the organization, the more that this conversation proceeds. But what have some of the early adopting boardrooms or board members, what have they shared with y'all as the top 1 or 2 reasons that they're totally sold, on board, in both supporting Take Your Seat and engaging y'all to increase the representation in their boardrooms? What have been the reasons why that they've been so gung-ho about it?
I think one of the reasons that a lot of organizations and individuals is, number one, our focus on Black professionals. We have built the largest directory of Black professional talent that currently exists. So we've just blasted that whole pipeline issue out of the water. And to be honest, it was never there. We were hiding in plain sight, but we've made this so that it's not an issue, right? So that's one thing. I think the other thing is we've plainly said what you can do. Like, this isn't hard. And it's interesting how the boards have interpreted this idea of give a seat, add a seat, make room, right? And I'll use a company as an example that I spoke with yesterday. And their thought was, yes, we just placed a couple of Black executives on our board. And the way we did it was through the board review process. So the boards, and most people don't know this, but boards have a review, like an employee review process, but it's specific to the boardroom, where they look at who's on the board, how long have they been on the board, what are their contributions, so they get evaluated by a third-party source, and then that allows a board to refresh itself and to bring new members on. So one of the things that occurs is when the boards realize we can do this, because it's a 3-step process. It's having the awareness that they want to do it. They want to create a more diverse board. They get it that their shareholder value is going to be higher. Their bottom line is going to be better. And then they kind of stop and pull back and say, how is this going to happen? So it was interesting to hear this one, story about how they realized that they already had the internal mechanism to make it happen. And it was just so encouraging, because it also makes you realize that this idea of creating systemic change sometimes can happen within the system that they currently have made, right? So I'm just very much encouraged by the support, the partners in ACD, the Director Diversity Initiative out of the University of North Carolina, Santa Clara's Black Corporate Board Readiness Program, Harvard's Black MBAs. I mean, there are all of these different groups who are saying we want to be a part of this, and we know that we can move it forward. I think that's the other thing, is just the positivity that a lot of people have around this issue, and knowing that there's something they can do.
And you're kind of answering my follow-up questions of like, how does this all work? If someone's interested in engaging with Take Your Seat.
Go to takeyourseat.co and join the community. That's what we do. It's super simple. We want allies. We want Black professionals. We want executive search firms. We want HR directors. We want anyone and everyone who's interested in this issue, not just because you want a board seat, right? But because you're interested in board service. And I think that's another idea, that you have to know that you want to sit on a board to be of service. You want to be of service to this company so it can do better, right? It's like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So now these companies get the opportunity to know better so they can do better, and you're a part of that process.
And so where then do you find there's resistance, or where are our barriers to advancing the mission of Take Your Seat? Because if you're solving, very easily kind of refutable pain points, the pipeline one, for example, what are we up against in having more of our boardrooms be as representative of America as possible?
About 80% of searches today are done network to network as opposed through search firms. So it's really who you know. And so when you have white CEOs with white boards, what do? They surround themselves with themselves, right? It's a network game. And so the barrier right now is that the networks are really limited and focused and repeat the whole cycle. And so we don't have a pipeline issue. We have got, literally tens of thousands of highly qualified Black executives. But the white boardrooms don't understand, know, and connect with the Black executives. And so by creating Take Your Seat, what we're doing is we're solving the network problem. We're solving the connection, because we have a pipeline that of ready and well curated and high caliber executives, but we just need to be able to plug them in. So that's historically one of the issues, and the other is there's been very little pressure to change. And the good news there is the pressure is building, and that's coming from shareholders. That's coming from major institutional shareholders, groups like CalPERS and others. It's coming now increasingly from the financial institutions. And it's also being advanced by groups like NASDAQ, who are requiring greater disclosure and requiring people to, boards to increase their diversity. So the trend right now is our friend. And we're, like anything, you see those that are the first to move, those who want to lean in, those who will be a slow mover who will move with the pressure, and those that won't move. And that third group is really going to run into difficulty. They're going to be forced with some tough choices. But we're really trying to focus ourselves on the CEOs and the boards that want to make the change. And we're, gladly working, as Jerusha mentioned, with so many different well-networked organizations. We're trying to connect ourselves as a networked force within that network to connect with as many businesses as possible. So I think the nice thing is the momentum's on our side right now. And the historic barriers are quickly coming
And
down.
Jerusha, if you'd like to add anything to that.
Well, I would just say John has just stated it so beautifully, because we're all about bridging that networking gap. That's the major, that's the number one thing, right? Holding everyone back is that you don't know a Black person, you've never had one to dinner, you don't belong to a Black organization, you don't have Black people easily reachable into your network. And it's very much like what Melody Hobson talks about, being color brave, reaching out beyond your comfort zone. Because guess what? If it was inside your comfort zone, it would already be happening, right? So we're all going to have to get used to the idea of being uncomfortable in order to create this change. The other thing is the idea that, it took a long time to get here, and it's not going to be necessarily something that happens overnight. Like the CEOs who've gone through this process, they talk about the amount of time it took for them to stand up and identify their privilege and say they're a white male, and to really get educated around this issue. And then also to be able to say, I might fail, like I might be failing forward. This is not something you do it right the first time. It could be a little messy. And in that is some of the great juice and some of the great learning. And I think listening to CEOs like David Heath from Bombas, who was at a recent Take Your Seat Founders Roundtable as a guest, and he talked about the process by which he came to getting his board to be more diverse, and that it was a process, not just a decision, right? But a process. And I think that's an idea that, people have to
I'd be interested to hear about that in particular, because I imagine there may be scenarios where perhaps it's a CEO or a single member of a board who maybe has explicitly discovered Take Your Seat, for one, or two, has just become more presently aware of many of those things you just mentioned there, Jerusha. Is there any sort of support that y'all would advise or support that Take Your Seat offers for people who are like, hey, I kind of want to have a confidential conversation here. This is the vision that I have. Is there support that y'all offer for folks like that?
Yes, there is. Every CEO who's joined Take Your Seat, they talk about the community and how much support that they've received in that decision-making process, the resources, the board members they get to talk to who've gone through that process already, the candidates. We actually have events where they're able to talk with a small group of candidates and talk about their company, what they're looking for on their board, what this looks like, and kind of what this means to them, and what if I do this, and is this going to be wrong, and that kind of thing, which is important. We've created a safe place for these groups to come together and meet and actually, work out this particular process. And I do feel like Take Your Seat is very unique in that you do have a community of other like-minded people that you can be on this journey with. So whether it's other CEOs that you can message, whether it's other, board members that you can speak with, I think that is one of our big values.
There's a point that I'd like to touch back on, specifically one of the barriers you mentioned there, John, being pressure. And so at the moment, it seems that people are making these voluntary commitments and actions to diversify their boardrooms. But I'm speaking to this very ignorantly. I'm curious if y'all imagine sometime in the future that there will be some sort of corporate law or legislation that might require a particular level of diversity or representation in boardrooms? And if, in y'all's opinion, if that should be the goal, if that's something that we should seek out?
Yeah, Cory, great question. And there already is precedent here. So California has mandated greater diversity on California boards already. And there's some backlash to that, but it's a powerful force. The NASDAQ is making transparency and reporting a requirement and advancing the idea of greater diversity. There are rating agencies for public companies that look at and rate the board, and they are increasingly looking at diversity in the boardroom on whether they'll support a vote for that board or not. So yes, there's both non-governmental and governmental regulation that is advancing, and I think that those are pretty powerful forces. One of the things that Jerusha touched on is this notion of fear, and I experienced it myself as a white man and with white privilege. Is how do I come to grips with this? How do I learn the language? How do I build comfort in what makes me uncomfortable? And that's not an easy process, and that's something we're trying to kind of lean into and help solve. And so not only is one of our goals to place Black executives onto boards, but it is to make boards more successful. It's what we call board health. Mm-hmm. And board health is that notion that you create an inclusive environment in and around the board table, that you're not necessarily diverse just by having, a token woman or a token Black member. That's not true diversity. We have to create true inclusivity. And so that process we call board health, and that's something that we're working on at Take Your Seat as well.
And it's a big mission for us, Cory, because it's part of this idea of reciprocal mentorship. So when these, board diversity movements started earlier the year, it was all around the idea of, can we get the Black candidates ready? Are they qualified? And we've been ready to be ready, a lot of us, for a long time. So we're looking at the idea that the boards need to get ready. They have to be made ready to accept 1, 2, hopefully 3 diverse candidates on their board, to get numbers and to be comfortable with difference. And I look at this, what we're doing within the community, as what we call shared collaborative experiences. So we provide a way for people of difference to come together and learn together, learn about diversity, learn about board governance, learn about what it takes to create that inclusive boardroom of the future. And that's a huge part of where we're going forward. And so I
want to be respectful of y'all's time here. And so kind of maybe one more open-ended question, because John, you mentioned that the trends are on your side at the moment. However, I don't think as an organization, Take Your Seat, just lackadaisically got together, folks very casually getting together. I think what it seems that y'all have accomplished in the network that you're building and the conversations that you're having so quickly perhaps is really rather impressive. So I'd be curious to hear from an organizational standpoint, what has allowed y'all to organize so quickly and move so fast here in such early stages, despite the wind being behind the sails, so to speak, because I'm sure that's not just it.
Jerusha's great leadership. That's one of the components. I think a few things. One is we as a team are really mission aligned. And when you're aligned and you have clarity of purpose, things move much faster. Secondly is, we've self-financed this so far. So it's allowed us the freedom to move very, very quickly. And we kept our membership to date has been free. And so we've really been able to build a big community because we wanted it to be accessible and inclusive. And so, and then we've had some great corporate partners step up and support us. Groups like PNC Bank, AEA, which is a private equity group, Beauty Counter. We team with Mintz, a great law firm. And so we've had these corporate sponsors who've seen what we've done and are moving alongside us. We've also teamed up with B Lab, the governance body behind the B Corp movement, and they've been an essential partner from the get-go. So this notion of pairing and partnering has been really a powerful force, and it's gone faster than we thought, but we've got so far to go as well. So we're encouraged, but we're a long way from the finish line.
And I would just second everything John has said, especially the part about pairing and partnering. So this is a huge job, right? Systemic change, a movement pushing forward. This is huge. We've welcomed everyone. We've talked to every person, every organization who said that they're interested. We've invited all to join us, and we've looked for ways to work together quickly, to be tactical, to not try to put hierarchies and stuff in the way, right? We've just said, okay, what can we do now? What can we do now to make a difference, to put forward? Like, what's your strength? What's our strength? Where do they meet? And I have to say that every conversation that I have with another leader, that it's pretty much what it's about, is how can we work together? At this point, I think it's kind of funny. I realized yesterday in a conversation with Lisa Shallett, the leader of Executive Women on Boards, that 6 months ago, when, kind of started in earnest, people would talk about competition, like who are we in competition with, and what kind of competition do we have? Now I so rarely hear that word when I'm meeting with a potential partner. It's all about how can we collaborate? How are we going to work together? How are we connected? It's just such a breath of fresh air that I feel that everyone's now bringing to the space with Take Your Seat and seeing us as a potential, let's get it done partner. We're walking with you. We're going in the same direction. Let's get after it. And that's what makes this getting up every day, getting after it, like so cool. So, and I have to say, Cory, you're one of those. I mean, look at this. Look, hey, we didn't stop when we had tech. You just kept on going and said, look, we're going to get it done. We're going to share Take Your Seat. It's going to happen.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
So
I really appreciate the compliment. I tested my Wi-Fi and everything before this call, so speeds were high. And so I'm wondering, you did mention that the actions are very explicit earlier, Jerusha, but I'd love to reiterate. The website, the homepage there is pretty clear too. But for folks listening in who are interested and curious to engage further with Take Your Seat, however that looks, what do you recommend they do? Where do you recommend that they go?
Well, I recommend they come, join, Take Your Seat, come to the community. It's takeyourseat.co, not .com. When you come and join the community, tell people about yourself. Fill out your profile. The number one way that a board leader, director, CEO is going to get to know you is by what's in your profile. If you don't fill it out, it's all about getting to know you. So really, we encourage everyone, present your best self. You can load up your board resume, your personal work resume, your LinkedIn profile, but get in there and tell people who you are. And then once you've done that, get in there and attend the events. Engage. Look around and see who's from the same school that you are. You can actually go to the filter. Today, it was funny. I was meeting with the Harvard alumni group, and the first thing they did was they went in to see how many people from Harvard were inside the community. And they were thrilled. They were like, oh, I know that person. That person's a member of our group. So it's really cool to see that there are other people who are a member of the community, right? Who are interested in doing the same thing you're interested in doing. They have a passion about board diversity as well. So that's my advice. Come, join, and engage.
And if you're on a board and what we've shared resonates and you'd like us to support your company in a search, we'd love to do that. So you can come on our site and learn more or reach for Jerusha or me, and we'd be happy to connect with you personally and scope out how Take Your Seat can help you advance diversity on your own board.
I love it. All right. We'll have all things Take Your Seat linked up in our show post at growensemble.com. John, Jerusha, thank y'all so much for taking the time and battling the technology to make sure that we got this recorded. So thanks again, y'all. I really appreciate it.